Hey, what's going on, everyone? Man, we got one heck of a page today. One heck of a page. Well, welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today, this heck of a page is Daf Lamed Vav. Funny enough, Daf Lamed Vav of Brachos was also one heck of a page. What's the deal with Lamed Vav, man? Anyways, alright. Fine. Well, I hope you're all excited for one heck of a page. Let's do a quick overview. So, alright, truth is the first Amud really isn't too difficult, and it's kind of interesting. So, can you light candles after the final shofar blast, right? So you still have, let's say, 18 minutes. The Gemara doesn't say anything about 18 minutes, but, can you still light candles after the final shofar blast, or is it too late? We're going to talk about Muktza, 3 different opinions, and perspectives towards Muktza. We are then going to begin a new perek of Hakira. And this is where things get hectic. Basically, we are going to busy ourselves with, what did I write here? Can food be placed or left on a fire on Shabbos? Can you put food on a fire? Can you leave food on a fire from before Shabbos? These are what we're going to concern ourselves with. So, cool. Maybe use the first Amud of the page to kind of warm yourself up for the second Amud. It's like, this is one of those pages where you gotta kind of make a chart. It's one of those. So, I'll make a chart for you guys. But even the chart, you still gotta work through the chart. Okay, let's go weiter, friends. Okay. Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis, about 8 lines from the bottom. Amr Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina. Oh, says the very, very, very holy Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina. Shamaiti Shem Balahadlik Achar Shesh Tkios Madlik. Okay, so he says that I heard. Remember yesterday, the last thing we talked about was these 6 shofar blasts that they would blow on Friday, and after those shofar blasts, it was Shabbos. So now Rabbi Yossi Reb Chanina says that he heard that really the truth of the matter is that after the final shofar blast, you still do have a little bit of time to light candles if you haven't lit candles yet. Because, after all, the guy who's blowing the shofar, right, he's blowing the shofar at the shul or wherever it is, so the guy who's blowing the shofar has to get home before Shabbos with his shofar. So the truth is that once the final blast ends, you still have that amount of time that it takes for the chazan to get home. That's how much time he leaves to, before Shabbos actually starts. So you do have a little bit of time over there. Amrulo, they said to him, Imke, nasata devarach l'shiurin. I love that, right? So they said to him, wait a second, but if that's the case, then you're basically nasata devarach l'shiurin. How does Rashi define that? L'shiurin, says Rashi, pa'amim shebeso karev, pa'amim shebeso rachok. Sometimes his house is close, sometimes his house is far. Meaning, shiurim are like measurements. Basically, you're not being clear. If we say that immediately after the last shofar blast, it's Shabbos, so it's pretty clear. You hear the last shofar blast, it's Shabbos. That is that. But if you say that, after the last shofar blast, you have enough time that it takes for the guy to get home, well, what does that mean? Maybe he lives next door. Maybe he lives 2 blocks away. How long does it take him to get home? So you're basically you're being vague in your measurements, right? You're giving your words to be, measured differently. It's not clear what the halacha is, and that's a problem. We need to be clear in our instructions, and therefore the Ella rather says, I guess the Chachamim, Makom tsanua yesh lo l'chazan hakneses b'rosh gago shesham miniach shofaro. That rather on the roof of the shul, which is where he was blowing the shofar, so there was a hidden place over there. That's where the chazan, after he blew the final shofars, he would simply put the final tekios. He would simply put his shofar in this designated spot, and and it was Shabbos. That's it. After the final shofar blast, it was Shabbos. He wouldn't walk home with his shofar. And then he says, because you don't move, you don't touch, well, not touch, but you don't move on Shabbos a shofar which is like a ram's horn that we blow on Rosh Hashanah, or chatzotzos. Chatzotzos were like these long kind of horns that they would like blow in the desert. They had like different horns for like different things. And anyways, so we don't move the shofar or the chatzotzos on Shabbos because they are Muktza. Okay, fine. Very good. And Rashi points out, like even inside, like even in Rosh Hashanah, you wouldn't be able to move them because they're Muktza. So it doesn't really answer why he's not going to walk home with these things. He's not going to walk home with these things because he can't carry in Rosh Hashanah. So it's not, this isn't exactly an explanation of why he's not going to walk home with it, but it would be an explanation, I guess, why he would need to put it away immediately, because once Shabbos comes in, he can't touch these things anymore. Well, he can't move these things anymore. So now, once we mentioned about moving the shofar and the chatzotzos, right? So basically that machlokas is done, right? That machlokas about, can you light candles after the final blasts or not? It's done, right? Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina seem to think that you can still light candles after the final shofar blast. The Chachamim said to him, no, the guy would just put it away immediately afterwards, and it was Shabbos. But we then mentioned that this Chazan would put away this shofar because he cannot move the shofar or chatzotzos on Shabbos. So now Ve'atanya, but one second, we have a brayso that says shofar mitaltal v'chatzotzos einam mitaltalin. And second, we have a brayso that says that actually you're allowed to move a shofar. You're allowed to move a shofar. And Rashi explains, Ve'atanya shofar mitaltal, says Rashi, the fisha kafuf rosho, because that right. I'm sure most people here have seen a shofar. It's like, it's not straight. It's kind of like almost like a hockey stick shape, depending which way you hold it. Right? You could theoretically use it as like a bottle for a baby, right? You could theoretically take this shofar, right? It's got sort of the smaller opening that is like the mouthpiece. It's got the larger opening and at the other end where the sound comes out. But you could theoretically pour water in it from the wider area and then stick the sort of mouthpiece area in the baby's mouth, and it could be like a makeshift kind of bottle. So whereas the chatzotzros, there's really no other use for them other than they're, blowing them as an instrument, which is also, which would be not allowed on Shabbos. And it says, Rashi, v'have davar shemlachto le'isur. It would be something that its usage is forbidden, right? Which is interesting. So whereas the shofar, even though generally speaking, you would use it to blow, and you wouldn't blow the shofar on Shabbos, but because you can use it for other purposes, so then it wouldn't be Muktza. Whereas the chatzotzros you can only use for sort of not allowed purposes, so therefore there's no reason why you should be allowed to move it on Shabbos. Okay, so what do? We have one brayso which seems to be saying that you are unable to move either neither a shofar nor chatzotzos. We have another brayso that seems to be saying, no, shofar is totally cool. Chatzotzos you can't move. So Rav Yosef, lo kasha kam b'yochid kam b'tzibur. So it says in the Gemara, Rav Yossi, the Gilon changed it to Rav Yosef, lo kasha kam b'yochid kam b'tzibur. If you are by yourself, so then you would be allowed to move a shofar. We're going to figure this out in a second. Right? If you're by yourself, then you would be allowed to use a shofar. Allowed to move a shofar, it wouldn't be Muktza. Whereas if you're b'tzibur, right, if you're in a congregation, then you would not be allowed to use the shofar. Amalei Abaye, uviyachad l'may chazi. So Abaye says to Rav Yosef, he says, one second. You just said that you're allowed to use a shofar. It's not Muktza when it's biyachid, but it's Muktza b'tzibur. Well, why isn't it Muktza when you're biyachid? If it's not Muktza, that clearly means that there's a use that you have for it. What use do you have for it? Well, it must be because you could pour water into there and use it as a bottle for a baby. Well, right, mayim letinok. Well, b'tzibur nami chazi letinok ani. Well, also b'tzibur in public, you can use that. Oh, I guess that's the point. Okay, I see. Because the point is that in public, I guess who are you gonna, when you're at home, so it's your baby. You can use a shofar for your baby. If you're in public, so then you wouldn't be able to use the shofar for somebody else's baby. It's not your responsibility to feed their baby. So therefore, I guess using the shofar for that purpose wouldn't be allowed. But Rashi points out that the point of, right, it would be allowed to give water to a baby who's poor, from a poor family, because it's the responsibility of the community to take care of that child. And therefore, even B'tzibur, you would be allowed to use this, the shofar should not be Muktza, since you can use the shofar to give water to a poor child whose responsibility is upon everybody to feed. So therefore, we're back to our original question, right? How come one brisa says that a shofar and chatzotzos would be Muktza, because there's no use for either one of them, apparently. And according to one brisa, it says, no, shofar would actually be okay. Only chatzotzos would be Muktza. Visu, and to make things worse, or more complicated, but not really complicated, just to add to kind of the question, this isn't that complicated. Haditanya, kishem shemitaltlin es shofar, kach metaltlin es chatzotzos, money. What about this third brisa, that it says that actually, not only are you allowed to move a shofar, you can even move chatzotzos. You can even move these chatzotzos horns. So how are you going to explain that? We basically have the entire gamut of this shofar and chatzotzos combinations. We say in one brisa, both of them are muksa. One of the other brises says that shofar is not muksa, chatzotzos are muksa. And we have a third one that says that neither shofar nor chatzotzos are muksa. What is the deal? Ela lo kasha. No problem. Harab Yehuda, Harab Shimon, Harab Nechemya. 3 different brises, 3 different Tanaim. The first brisa that says that both, let's actually get to that one last. The second brisa that says that the shofar is not muksa and the chatzotzos are muksa, that's Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rabbi Yehuda holds of muksa, right? Rabbi Yehuda holds of muksa. However, so let's read the top Rashi. Harab Yehuda, shofar mitaltel, you're allowed to move the shofar, v'chatzotzos einan mitaltelin. Right? It's the second Rashi on the page. But you cannot move the chatzotzos, the muksahu. Because the chatzotzos are muksa. Aval shofar toras kli alav kedam le'el. However, the shofar has a toras kli. Since you can use the shofar for feeding a baby, well, then it's just a kli. It's an object, and it's usable on Shabbos. So therefore, it's not muksa. So Rabbi Yehuda holds of muksa, but in order for something to be muksa, it would have to not be a kli. A shofar is a kli. You can use it to feed a baby, and therefore it is not muksa. Whereas the chatzotzos, you can really only use it for blowing it. And blowing it is not allowed on Shabbos, and therefore there's no reason to say that it should be muksa. It has no other potential purposes. Now, the brisa that says that both the shofar and the chatzotzos are permitted to be moved, that's Reb Shimon. Because Reb Shimon doesn't hold of muksa, right? What does Rashi say? Reb Shimon, he delays le muksa. He completely doesn't hold of muksa. That's why there's one brisa that says that you can move both the shofar and the chatzotzos, because if you don't hold of muksa, then there's no reason why you can't move the shofar and the chatzotzos. Don't blow it, but you can move it. And then there was that first brisa which says that both the shofar and the chatzotzos are muktza and you can't move them. That's Rabbi Nechemya. Because Rabbi Nechemya holds of muksa, but he's more strict than Rabbi Yehuda. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says that, look, even though really the main thing that you do with the shofar is you blow it, okay, but you can theoretically use it as a bottle, so therefore it's not muksa. Rabbi Nechemya says, no way. Shofars are for blowing. I don't care that you can theoretically use it as a bottle. A kli must be used for its main purpose. If its main purpose is permitted, well then you can use it for that permitted purpose. If its main purpose is for something that's not allowed, well, that's it. You can't use it even for a permitted purpose. Right? He says even like a talis, right? Even like a cloak, a garment, right? You can use it as a garment. You wouldn't be able to use it, for any other use. Meaning it's permitted for it, so you wouldn't be able to use it, let's say, I don't know, maybe as a blanket or something, or I don't know, as a tablecloth, let's say, something like that. No, when things are, according to Rabbi Nechemya, things that are, permitted on Shabbos are permitted for their use that they're generally permitted for and for nothing else. Now, the question is, according to Rabbi Nechemia, the question is the order of the brisa, right? According to, we said that this brisa that says that you are not allowed to move a shofar, and you are also not allowed to move chatzotzros, we said that that's Rabbi Nechemia. But here's the thing. According to Rabbi Nechemia, once we already say that you're not allowed to move the shofar, even though the shofar could theoretically be used as a bottle, Rabbi Nechemia nonetheless says you cannot move the shofar, since its main use is to blow, and that's asur. Well then, obviously, the chatzotzros, you wouldn't be allowed to move on Shabbos. The only thing that you can use chatzotzros for is for blowing. There's no other purpose. So obviously, if this shofar, where I can make the argument that, but yeah, you can use it as a bottle, and nonetheless Rabbi Nechemia says no, it's Muktza because its main use is for blowing. Well then, kal v'chomer, the chatzotzros, which is only used for blowing, you would not be allowed to move that. So the question is, why does the brisa have to first say shofar and then follow it up with chatzotzros? It's obvious that if you can't move the shofar, you can't move the chatzotzros. So umay shofar, nami chatzotzros. When this brisa of Rabbi Nechemia says you can't move a shofar and you can't move a chatzotzros, well, the shofar is actually the chatzotzros, and the chatzotzros are the shofar. Ay, 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 ay. You gotta flip them around. How come? Kidu Rav Chizda. It's like Rav Chizda. The Amar Rav Chizda. Hanitlas mile ishtine shmayu michicharav beis hamikdash. Wow. The following three things, once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, their names switched. Their names flipped around with each other. What does that mean? Chatzutzarta shofar shofar chatzutzarta. That what we once upon a time referred to as chatzotzros started to be referred to as a shofar, and what was once upon a time referred to as a shofar started to be referred to as a chatzotzros. The nafkamine, the shofar for Rosh Hashanah. The nafkamine being for the shofar for Rosh Hashanah. So for example, if an Am Haaretz would ask you, as Rashi says, hey, what do I use to blow on Rosh Hashanah? You would tell him chatzotzos, because if you tell him chatzotzos, then he'll go and get a shofar. You would tell him shofar, you would tell him go get chatzotzos. Now, at this point, I think when we refer to a shofar, we actually refer to what the Torah refers to as a shofar, right? We refer to a shofar on Rosh Hashanah, not chatzotzos. But anyways, so Rav Chizda says that those two things got flipped around, and therefore, in the brisa that Rabbi Nechemia is saying that you can move a shofar, and you can also move chatzotzos, it's really basically saying that you can move chatzotzos and you can even move a shofar. Okay, now the Gemara continues. What are the other two things? Tzaftzif, arava tzaftzifa, tzaftzifa arava. Good morning, neighbors. So also arava, right? The myrtle branch, the willow branch. I think arava is defined as willow, right? The aravas from the lulav. So the aravas, they started calling tzafzifa, which is actually not kosher for aravos. It's like rounder and different stalk, it's different stem. So the tzafzifa, they started to refer to arava as tzafzifa arava. My nafkamina lulav. The nafkamina is, what do you put in your lulav? Okay. Psora, psora. And then they started calling small tables, large tables, small tables. The minor nafkamina lemekach. And the nafkamina is for doing business. If I order, the small table, I intend to get the small table, not the big table. All right. Amar Abaye, said Abaye, afanu nomar hovlila bekase hovlila. All right. Without getting into too much detail. Also, I don't know too much detail. I'll be honest. But anyways, this has to do with chulin. It has to do with animals' intestines, okay? And I put a picture over there in the WhatsApp group. I've also attached it to the podcast and stuff like that. Anyways, so in an animal's stomach, there are 4 sections, I believe. So one of those sections is called the Beis HaKosos. The Beis HaKosos is made up of all these, and you'll see it in the photo. And, well, I don't know if it's a photo or a rendering, whatever it is, you'll see it. So, it's basically made up of all these, little cups. And each wall of each cup is basically, is double thick, because you have the, wall of this particular cup as well as the thickness of the wall of the cup next to it, right? Almost imagine if you take 2 boxes and put them right next to each other. So there's gonna be double thickness right next to those boxes, because you have the sides of both boxes. Okay? Whereas this other thing that's called the meses, and the meses is or the hovlila, which I believe is the meses. So that is only, the walls there are only like one thickness. So the question is, if you get a needle stuck in these walls of the meses, or well, I guess he's calling it the hovlila, or the beis hakosos. So what if a needle punctures the wall and it's not going through the other side? Okay? So here we go. So, lemay nafkamina, what's a nafkamina of, the fact that we're switching around the hovlila and the beikase? So, lemachat shenimtzeis ba'ovi beis hakosos demitzad echad. Okay? That we say that if you have a needle that gets stuck in the walls of the beis hakosos, so, and it's not sticking through the other end, it's not sticking through the other side, so kshera. So, the animal would be kosher. Umishnei tzadim treifa. But if it's puncturing through both sides, so then, in one side and out the other, then it would be a treifa. Now, this needs to specifically be in the beis hakosos. If it's in this hovlila, then it would be a treifa even if it's not sticking out the other side. So it's important to know what's the beis hakosos and what's the hovlila. So Abai is saying that those also got flipped around. Okay, fine. Rav Ashi hat gesagt, said Rav Ashi, af anu nomar, we will also say, bavel borsif bavel, that borsif and bavel got switched around. Fine, the nafkamina legite nashim, the nafkamina is regarding a get, when a woman gets divorced, right, this document that the husband gives the wife, this divorce document. So Rashi points out that there are two possible explanations for this. One is that we say that when it comes to a get, so in Bavel they were experts, but in all other places they were not. So therefore, if Bavel is borsif, then that means that in borsif they're experts. The other one is that you have to make sure that you write the correct names, right? That the names on the document need to match, need to be correct. So borsif and Bavel, you have to know which one's which. Hadran alach b'meh madlikin. Oh, shkaich. So we just, Baruch Hashem, finished the perek of b'meh madlikin. And we will come back to you. And now we begin perek Hakira. Okay. Exciting stuff. Alright. So you just gotta help cup a shtickle, okay? You gotta focus here. You gotta focus here a little bit, okay? Focused? Good. Kira. Shisikua b'kash uvigvava. Okay. So if you have a stove, right? A stove, it's a heat source that you put a pot on top of it, okay? Shisikua b'kash uvigvava, and you lit it with straw or with some kind of just rakings from the field. Who said it? It said it somewhere that basically, it's whatever, he quotes some old French word or whatever, and then that goes with Tunim explains that basically after you harvest like wheat or whatever it is, it's what's ever left on the ground. So if you light a fire with that stuff, so these things are very flammable. They don't really flammable and they burn quickly. They don't really make a very intense heat. Okay, so therefore it's not really mosif hevel. It doesn't really increase heat. It's not really going to cook something. Okay, it's more like gonna keep things warm. So kira shisikua b'kasha v'gvava. So if you have a stove that's been lit with some straw or some rakings, nosnim alea tavshil, you're allowed to put a cooked dish on it, right? I understand that a tavshil is a dish that's already been cooked. It's not raw food. It's a cooked dish. So basically, you're putting it on the stove to kind of keep warm, but you're not really cooking it. Now, we're going to be busy with basically the rest of the daf. We're going to be busy with what does this mean to put something on a stove? Does it mean to mamish, put it on the stove? Does it mean that you can leave it on if you had it on the stove from before Shabbos? Can you leave it on the stove on Shabbos? For now, we're just going to read and translate this Mishnah. There's a lot of stuff that's going to have to happen in the Gemara to make sense of this Mishnah. So, kirashi sikua b'kasha v'kvava nosnam alea tavshil. Fine. If you have this stove that's been lit with straw or with these rakings, you could put a cooked dish on this stove. Again, we're just going to translate it. What it actually means, we'll find out. Begefes uve'etzim. However, if you light this stove with gefes, and I think I'm probably just going to refer to this as gefes for the rest of the daf, but it's just easier. But gefes is basically these sesame, if you take sesame seeds and you squeeze out the oil from the seeds and you're left with basically the empty seeds, this, like the raw seeds. So if you light your stove with that, I guess that seems to be a stronger heat. Uve'etzim, or if you light it with wood, which is a more intense heat than like straw, well, in that case, lo yiten, do not put the cooked dish on the stove. Ad sheyigrof or ad sheyiten es ha'efer. Until you kind of shovel away some of these coals, okay, so that it's not a super intense heat. So that, the way I understand it is basically, so it's no longer mosif hevel, it's no longer cooking the thing, it's no longer providing too much heat. You kind of remove, you scrape, you shovel away some of the coals so that it just becomes kind of eno mosif hevel, it becomes just sort of keeping things warm but no longer cooking. Or what you could do is you could just kind of throw some ash on top of the fire to kind of cool it down so that it's not as intense as it was. Okay? Now, Beis Shammai Omrin, we're going to have to explain all this stuff in the Gemara. Beis Shammai Omrim says, Beis Shammai chamin, hot water, avalo tavshil, but you can't put a cooked dish on the stove. Okay, we're going to have to explain what this means. Beis Hillel Omrim chamin vitavshil. Beis Hillel says you could put hot water and cooked food. Okay. Beis Shammai Omrim notlin avalo machzirin. Beis Shammai says that you can remove something from the stove, but you cannot put something back onto the stove. You can't put something on the stove. Okay, and I'm assuming that it means machzirin. Well, no, Rashi says actually the leftover foods, right? So let's say you're eating your food and there's some leftovers. Can you put that back on the stove? Okay. You can even put it on the stove. We just said a lot of stuff. We said a lot of kind of random stuff for now. The Gemara is going to have to explain to us what is going on in this Mishnah. Okay, so basically we talked about, if you light a stove with materials that do not create a super intense heat. We talked about lighting a stove that does create an intense heat and how you have to remove some of the, do things to the fire to make it a less intense heat. We talked about putting water on the stove versus putting food on the stove. We talked about, can you put things back on the stove or not? Okay, so let's start to try and make some sense of this. Here we go. Ibayilahu. The Gemara asks a question. And this question is going to be based on the second line of the Mishnah, which is, we said that when you light the stove with eitzim or with gefes, right, with wood or with these sesame leftovers, okay, in that case the heat is too strong. You have to remove some of the coals or dim some of the coals so that the heat won't be as strong. And then we said yitain, right? It says lo yitain ad shiktov ad shitin as efer. Which implies that once you've done grufa and putting the afer is what's called ketuma, putting ashes on it, right? So grufa o ketuma, that once it is shoveled, once it is dimmed, once it's grufa o ketuma, then you can be no sein es atav shil onto the fire. So now the Gemara wants to know, Ibai Elahu. Hailo yitain, when it says that you can't put something onto this strong fire that was grufa o ketuma, so it's now not as strong. Lo yachziru, is it saying that you can't put food back onto this fire unless it's grufa uktuma? Avalish hos. But what about if you just never took it off the fire? What if before Shabbos you had your food and it was already cooked, let's say kamaycho ben drusai, it's already considered cooked, and now you're just leaving it on the stove? Can I leave it there without having to, shovel or dim the coals? Right? Lishos mashin, can we just leave something that was there from before? Even though the stove is not grufa uktuma, I can keep it at its original heat. Since I'm not putting it on the fire, I'm just leaving something that was already there. Right? Meaning, putting something on the fire would be more chumr, would be more strict, as opposed to leaving something that was already there and just leaving it there would be more lenient. Okay? So we want to know that, is this requirement of grufa ketuma, is that only if I want to actually put something on the stove? But maybe to leave something there, I can leave it even when the fire is strong. Umani, and who would be the author of this Mishnah? Who would agree to that? Chananya, it would be Chananya, as we saw in Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, Titania. Chananya Omer says Chananya, Koshu Kamaycho Ben Drusai, as long as something is Kamaycho Ben Drusai, it's already cooked 1/3 of the way, like that robber Ben Drusai, who is always on the move, Mutul Ashoso Agabe Kira, you would be allowed to leave it on the stove, okay, you can leave it on the stove even though the stove is not grufa uktuma, it's not shoveled or dimmed. Okay, so that would be one way to look at it. That the requirement to shovel or dim the fire is only if you want to put something on the fire, onto the stove. But to just leave something on the stove, you don't have to do anything, you can leave everything as is. O Dilma, This shows Tanan. No, or maybe it's saying, even just to leave something on the stove, you can only leave it on the stove if you remove or dim some of the wood or gefes. V'igaru v'katum in ilo lo. And only if the stove is grufa uktuma, that is when you can leave things on the stove. But choser, to put something back on the stove, forget it. V'chol sheken lachzir, certainly to put something, interesting, I guess the question would be, and certainly then to put something on the stove, it would certainly at least need to be grufa uktuma. Okay, fine. Okay, so now we're going to try to answer this question. Tashma, come in here. Midikatani trei bave b'masnisin. From the fact that once we move into the second part of our Mishnah, we are met with two machloksin between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Okay. Beis Shammai omrim, the first one being that Beis Shammai says chamin avalo tavshil, hot water but not a cooked dish. Okay, we're going to explain what that means. Beis Hillel omrim chamin v'tavshil. Beis Hillel says no, even hot water and even cooked food. Okay, that's machlokas number one. Beis Shammai omrim. Now machlokas number two is that Beis Shammai says notlin avalo machzirin, that you can remove something from the fire, but you can't put something back on the fire. Beis Hillel omrim af machzirin, and Beis Hillel says no, you can even put something back on the fire. Okay, here we go. Now we're going to try to make sense of this whole Mishnah. Okay, so I can make sense of the Mishnah if when we're talking about this whole grufa uktuma thing, that once you shovel or dim the fire, you would be allowed to leave something on the fire. Okay? Well then, hachitana, right? But if it's not grufa uktuma, if it's still as strong as it was, you wouldn't be able to leave it on the fire. It's only once it's grufa uktuma. Okay, then I get it. So hachikatani, this is how you read the Mishnah. Kira shisikua b'kasha v'gvava. If you have a stove that you lit it with straw or with rakings, things that are not mosif hevel, things that are just going to keep it warm but not cook it. Mashin alea tavshil. So you can leave a cooked food, a cooked dish, you can leave it from before Shabbos into Shabbos, since it's something that doesn't increase heat. Begefes uv'eitzim. However, if you are, if the stove is lit by the sesame leftovers or wood, which is a more intense heat, well then lo yashe. Well then don't leave something on that stove if it's going to have an intense heat that is mosif hevel. Ad sheyikrof o ad sheyiten efer. Until you remove some of the coal, or if you add ash to it, you basically weaken the fire so that it's no longer mosif hevel. At that point, then you can leave something on the stove. Okay. Umahin mashin. And what are these things that you're allowed to leave on the stove as long as the fire is not mosif hevel? Beis Shammai omrim chamin. Beis Shammai says hot water. Avalo tavshil, but not cooked food. Beis Hillel omrim chamin v'tavshil. Beis Hillel says no, you can leave from before Shabbos on a fire that's grufa uktuma, that isn't mosif hevel. You can leave both water and cooked foods. And just like they argue about if I can leave something from before Shabbos, the same machlokas is going to be, can I put something back on to the fire once I've taken it off? That Beis Shammai says you can take it off the fire, but you can't put it back onto the fire. Beis Hillel omrim af machzirin. And Beis Hillel says, no, you can even put it back on. And the entire Mishnah is only talking about B'davar she'eno mosif hevel. I imagine that if it's talking about B'davar mosif hevel, i.e. if you would have the wood or the gefes and you didn't, do anything to weaken the fire, then you wouldn't even be allowed to leave it onto the, on the fire. Certainly then you wouldn't be allowed to put it on the fire. Okay. So that's if you understand, this, as lihashhos, okay? That if you have grufo ketuma, you can leave it on. However, if you're going to say that what the Mishnah means is that with eitzim and with gefes, you can only if you are grufo ketuma can you actually put the thing back onto the fire, not just leave it there, but actually put it on the fire. Well, then hachikatani, then you'd have to teach the Mishnah in the following way, and we're going to see that we're going to run into problems. Kira shisikua b'kashu v'gvava. Okay, so a stove that you've fueled with straw or with rakings, a weaker fire that's not mosif hevel, machzirin alea tavshil. You can mamish put a cooked food on it. You could put food on it. Okay. Okay, beseder. Machzirin alea tavshil. Begefes uve'etzim. If you light this fire with sesame leftovers or with wood, right? Something that is a strong fire that's mosif hevel. Well, then lo yachzir ad sheyigrof o ad sheyitain efer. So then you can't put something on the fire unless you shovel it or dim it. Okay, fine, very good. Umayin machzirin. And so when we say that you're allowed to put something on the fire when it's davar she'eino mosif hevel, when it's not going to cook the thing. So Beishamai omrim chamen. Beishamai says you're allowed to put hot water, aval lo tafshil, but not foods. Uveis Hillel omrim chamen v'tafshil. And Beis Hillel says that you're allowed to put hot water as well as cooked foods on this fire. Now here comes the question. Now we move on to the next machlokas. Beishamai omrim notlin avalo machzirin. Beis Shammai says that you can take something off the fire, but you can't put it on the fire, right? And clearly this is going to be after we're talking about the cooked food, because we just said that you would be allowed to put hot water on this fire that is not mosif hevel. Uvesil omim af machzirin, you can even put it back. Well then, hasulamali, why do I need this second machlokas between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? It doesn't teach me anything at all. I already knew this beforehand, that when we're talking about a fire that is not mosif hevel, you would be allowed to put water back on. Everyone agreed we could put water back on it. Beis Shammai says you can't put food back on, but Beis Hillel says you can. It teaches us absolutely nothing. It doesn't add anything to the conversation. So therefore it must be that we're talking about leaving something on the fire. That the whole first part of the Mishnah is talking about, you can only leave something on the fire from before Shabbos if it's a davar she'eino mosif hevel, right? And if you lit the fire with wood or with the sesame leftovers, you would only be able to leave something there if you removed part of it. Okay? So it's talking about shehiyah, it's not talking about chazara. Fine. But the Gemara says actually, la'olam, emelach lahachzir tanan. Really, I will tell you that the Mishnah is talking about chazara. And when it says that you can only put something on the stove when it's with eitzim or begefes if you weaken the fire, it's talking about can you put something back on the stove? And we're saying only if you weakened it. But the Mishnah is missing a few words. And this is how you have to read the Mishnah. Kira shisikua b'kasha v'gvava. An oven that you fueled with straw or with rakings, i.e. davar she'eino mosif hevel, machzirin alea tavshil. You can put a cooked dish. Once you're done eating it, whatever's left over, you could put it back on the fire, since it's not mosif hevel. Fine. Begefes uve'etzim. If you fueled the stove with gefes or with wood, lo yachzir. Do not put it back because it's too strong of a fire. Unless you first shovel away some of the coal or you add ash to it to weaken the coals. Okay? Or to weaken the fire. Then you could put things back on, because it's no longer Mosif Hevel. Avalish hos, or what about, can I leave something on the fire, on the stove from before Shabbos? Even though the fire is not weakened in any way, it's Mosif Hevel, you can leave it on there. Just like Rabbi Chananya, who says that you can leave it on there even though it's not Garv and it's not Katum. Umahin Mashin, what are you allowed to leave on this fire that is raging? Shama says that you can leave hot water on this fire from before Shabbos, but not cooked foods. Basil says you can leave hot water as well as cooked food on this very strong fire as long as it was there before Shabbos and it was already cooked. I assume. And when we mentioned in the beginning of the Mishnah that a fire that is not Mosif Hevel, you're allowed to mamish put things back on the fire, well then lav divrei kolhi. By the way, it's not according to everybody. Ela machlokas b'shamei v'silel. It's machlokas b'shamei v'silel, and this is the second machlokas in the Mishnah. Shebeshamei omim noten v'lo machzirin. B'shamei says no, you're actually not allowed to put anything back on the fire. That's only according to Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel omim af machzirin. Beis Hillel says you can even put things back on the fire. Wow. Okay, so there's a lot of moving parts in this last part of the Gemara. There is davar hamosif hevel, davar she'eno mosif hevel. There is shehiyah, there is chazara, there is hot water, there is food, cooked foods, right? So there's a lot of moving parts, and we'll go over that in just a minute. Now, but I've also made a chart which, if you sit down with it and just kind of like, it's not a quick chart. It's kind of like a study chart, but I do think that the information is organized clearly, and so all that information there is there. I hope that it will help organize what's going on. But let's go over the daf, starting from the beginning, and we'll end off with sort of just a recap of the stuff that we just learned. I hope that's okay. Sorry if I'm if that's going to make it harder that we're recapping it in a few minutes. Yeah, maybe this isn't a good idea, but it's too late. Okay, so we started with, can you light candles after that final shofar blast on Friday? So Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says, yes, you may, because after all, the guy who blew the shofar needs to get home. The Chachamim said, no, you cannot, because there's no way to know how long it takes for this guy to get home. He says, right, imkin nasata dvarech l'shiurin, right? You made your stuff kind of subjective, and we need things to be clear. We talked about Muktza. 3 opinions about Muktza. Rabbi Shimon's opinion is there is no Muktza. Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that there is Muktza, but the definition of Muktza is that, it's only Muktza if there's no use for it at all on Shabbos. But something like a shofar, which you can use as a baby's bottle, well then it's not Muktza on Shabbos. Whereas Rabbi Nechemi says no. We define things are only allowed to be used on Shabbos for their main purpose, right? Be it a shofar, which means that it can't be used for any purpose at all because its main purpose is not allowed on Shabbos, or even something like a talis, right? Or a spoon, he even says, right? If you take a spoon is allowed on Shabbos only for eating with. You wouldn't be able to use a spoon for, to play like those funny relay races where you put the egg in the spoon, right? According to Rabbi Nechemi, that wouldn't be allowed. We began the new perek of Hakira, which we had to go really slowly through. And basically, so the main question then becomes in perek Hakira, can food be placed or left on a fire? Placed, referring to chazar, can I put it back on the fire? And being left on the fire means shehiyah, can I leave it from before Shabbos into Shabbos? So the way I kind of was able to divide it up clearly in my mind was to divide it up between something that's mosif hevel, something that increases heat, that's actually going to cook something, right? Such as the wood and those sesame leftovers, versus something that's she'eno mosif hevel, which doesn't increase heat, it'll just kind of keep things warm, which is like straw and those rakings, or even wood, or those sesame leftovers that you've kind of dimmed by either shoveling out some of it or adding some ash to it. So when it comes to something that's mosif hevel, something that increases heat, that actually cooks, well then in terms of chazara, can I take something and actually put it back on this raging fire? The answer is unequivocally no, right? Nobody would say that you can do that. However, shehiyah, can I leave something from before Shabbos into Shabbos? Well then, Beis Shammai says, yes, you can leave water, Beis Hillel says you can even leave food. Okay, fine. When it comes to something that's Eino Mosif Hevel, when it comes to something that just kind of keeps things warm, well, in that case, in terms of Chazara, can you return something? Beis Shammai says, no, you can't. Beis Hillel says, yes, you can. In terms of Shehiyah, what about, can you leave something there? So Mistama, Beis Hillel, if they say that you can return something to the fire, the Gemara doesn't say this. I'm just assuming that if you can return something to the fire, Mistama, then you should be able to just leave it from before Shabbos, which is more Mekil. I don't know what Beis Shammai would say, since they say that you may not put it on the fire that's not Mosif Hevel. Maybe when it comes to leaving it, since it's more Mekil, they would say it's okay, or maybe they keep their opinion that it's not allowed. The Gemara doesn't really say. Wow, okay, well, that's the first perek of Hakira. I have a feeling that this is going to be our reality for maybe the next week or two. These like complicated kind of pages, so I guess we'll have to see. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a great day. Bye.